What are your core values? Leaving the aspect of core aside for now, first we must define values. A value is something you care about, something that you are attached to. A positive value is something you're willing to work to get and or keep. A negative value is something you're willing to work to get rid of and or avoid. A non-value is something you are neither willing to work to get and or keep, nor to get rid of and or avoid. A non-value is neither a value nor a type of value. Therefore, there exists only two types of values: positive values and negative values. The more effortful work you are willing to put into them, the greater the values. Values, positive and negative, must be achievable or believed to be achievable. Anything unachievable is by default a non-value, characterized by their irrelevancy to your life. At this basic first level of understanding, you know how to distinguish between a positive value, a negative value, and a non-value, but you still don't know which values are core or not, nor what distinguishes them. To enter the next level of understanding, you must know what values and their relative importance are dependent upon. To you, a thing's value status, positive value, negative value, or non-value, is determined by your purpose. A purpose is either an intended pursuit of a positive value or an intended avoidance of a negative value. Different people can assign different value statuses to the same thing because different purposes produce different standards of value, the standards which value status evaluations are dependent upon. Take this casual example: pineapple on pizza. Person A can see it as a positive value, person B can see it as a negative value, and person C can see it as a non-value. A purpose, positive and negative, must be achievable or believed to be achievable. For that, a hierarchy of values is required. It is required because it enables action prioritization. Without a hierarchy of values, you have no standard to evaluate the importance of one path of action over another, and you become a slave to chance. The simplest way to visually express a hierarchy of values is to use a triangle, organized as such to place from tip to base the most fundamental, or least dependent, to least fundamental, or most dependent, values, respectively. The more fundamental a value is, the less dependent on other values it is. The less fundamental a value is, the more dependent on other values it is. Once your values are organized into a hierarchy of values, you can then distinguish which values are core or not. But to do so, you must first define the attribute of core when it comes to values. There are two possible definitions. The first definition is a value upon which all other values depend in a given hierarchy of values, aka the axiomatic or most fundamental value. This is what is meant when the term core value is brought up. The second definition is values immediately below the axiomatic value in a given hierarchy of values. This is what is meant when the term core values is brought up. At this second level of understanding, you know that your purpose determines the value status of a thing for yourself. Your purpose requires a hierarchy of values to be achievable. Your hierarchy of values determines your value's relative importance and enables you to identify your core values. But where do purposes come from? To enter the next level of understanding, you must know what purposes are dependent upon. You are a human. A human is a living being. A living being is a limited self-organizing system that works to resist entropy. All living beings are limited, and limits generate needs, which generates purposes to satisfy those needs. Without life, there are no needs. Without needs, there are no motivations. Without motivations, there are no purposes. And without purposes, there are no values. In order to most likely meet your needs, you need a means to knowledge. Human beings have three layered faculties of knowledge, each with their own physical correlates. sensation, perception, and conception. At the base layer, you have your faculty of sensation. This faculty is responsible for providing you with raw, chaotic information about reality. This faculty functions fully automatically and produces real information. To clarify, a unit of information is real if it successfully grasps reality in any form. Since all living beings are limited, such a grasp is never a complete grasp. A complete grasp, omniscience, besides being an impossibility, is not required when determining realness. What living beings have instead are limited grasps of reality, the same reality, limited by their specific sensory apparatus. Therefore, your faculty of sensation is responsible for your form of grasping reality, and because it grasps reality, it provides real information. Connected to that, you have your faculty of perception. This faculty is responsible for integrating your sensory information into entities. This faculty functions fully automatically and produces real information. Connected to that, you have your faculty of conception. This faculty is responsible for integrating your perceptual information into concepts. This faculty functions manually and is prone to error. What distinguishes you from most animals when it comes to faculties of knowledge is the level of sophistication of your faculty of conception. This is important because explicit purposes and values are conceptual entities, and concepts are prone to error. Valid concepts produce valid purposes, valid values, and valid hierarchies of both. Invalid concepts produce invalid purposes, invalid values, and invalid hierarchies of both. To determine the validity of a concept, you need a method of conceptual validation. A reality-based method of conceptual validation requires two things: that the contents of a concept be reducible to sensations, that the contents of a concept be consistent with every other validated concept. The first requirement determines whether or not a concept is related to your base level faculty of knowledge, sensation, your only means of grasping the facts of reality. For you, concepts that do not fulfill this requirement cannot be called knowledge. Instead, they are invalid and unintegrated floating concepts. Floating because they are not grounded in the real information provided by your faculty of sensation. The second requirement determines whether contradictions exist between the concepts you hold. Knowledge, after all, is knowledge of reality. Since reality is a single integrated whole, so too is knowledge. Satisfying this requirement is to satisfy the law of non-contradiction. To do so is to be a person of integrity. Now, because the faculty of conception functions manually, the process of conceptual validation, being conceptual itself, must also be done manually. This process is long and tedious, and there are no shortcuts. The reward for this effort is that you can then base your purposes, values, and your organization into hierarchies on validated concepts, on integrated knowledge that accurately pertains to reality. These are purposes and values you can actually pursue, fight for, and defend, which in turn generates the lasting positive emotions characteristic of the good life. The alternative is characterized by persistent and endless internal conflicts and self-doubt, the default into a life of pain avoidance primarily motivated by fear that generates no lasting positive emotions, frequently seen together with the adoption of a compensatory, self-destructive lifestyle endured by a never-enough stream of meaningless short-term pleasures. These are your choices, and this is what it takes to know your core values.